Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I am the Divine One and I'm bringing you yet another assortment. Well, would you look at this mess? It seems Trump done got himself checkmated again. Thought he was running the game, but baby, China, Canada, and Mexico slid right on through and played him like a dollar store Rubik's Cube. Ciao. Let's talk about how the so-called master negotiator is out here getting dog-walked by foreign economies, throwing temper tantrums. It's the morning time, so go ahead and grab your coffee, maybe a little mushroom tea, a little ginseng, cane, maybe a little gin, because the clownery is at an all-time high. The clown show that is the Trump administration, the Republican Party, MAGA, has given an encore performance internationally, and it's just embarrassing. We're going to get into some TikToks, and afterwards, there will be commentary. Let's go.
China said it will file a complaint with the World Trade Organization and take corresponding countermeasures over President Donald Trump's decision to impose new tariffs against it. I'm now joined by CNN News 18 Siddhant Mishra. Siddhant, after Canada, Mexico and now China also saying that there will be countermeasures that will be taken against this decision of Donald Trump at this point.
Well, that's right, Sharon. In fact, Donald Trump has announced tariff on Mexico, Canada, and China. Now, 25% tariffs have been imposed on Mexico and Canada, and 10% on China. Now, both Mexico and Canada have also announced retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods, and this would perhaps have effect on the prices of goods and also the free flow mechanism of the markets. And ultimately, the common man will suffer. But since this was the bold promise that Trump made, so now he has announced that. In fact, now we're getting to know that China has perhaps threatened U.S. to go to WTO, complaining against U.S. for imposition 10% of tariff on Chinese. In fact, this is what CNN International is reporting, that the Trump administration that after Mexico and Canada, now China has also taken a very, very strong stand on this entire issue. And now China has threatened U.S. to move to WTO.
The Chinese economy is certainly weak, not catastrophically so, however. I think rather than just looking to negotiate, what Beijing is going to try to do is hit back and retaliate, I think, as hard as they feel that they need to, depending on what the tariffs look like. What they're going to be focused on over 2025 is making sure that the tariffs are being met with as much monetary policy support and I think as much fiscal spending as is needed in order to counteract their impact. And I think a lot of that would really just come down to heavily supporting the industrial economy, the manufacturing economy in China. I think what they want to do is make sure that they're supporting their companies. They want to make sure that they remain a very important dominant power as far as manufacturing is concerned. They want to be a major player in high-tech manufacturing. The real takeaway there is, does that exacerbate the very trade problems that's inviting these tariffs to begin with?
But we have one very big power over China, and that's tariffs. And they don't want them, and I'd rather not have to use it. But it's a tremendous power over China.
中美经贸合作是互利共赢的，我们认为，如果双方有分歧和摩擦，应当通过对话和协商来解决。贸易战、关税战没有赢家，不符合任何一方的利益，也不利于世界。
Hoping to beat Trump's tariffs, furniture seller Harry Lee is doubling the number of products he ships to the U.S. and storing them in warehouses there. 4 out of 5 of his tables and other furnishings are sold to American consumers. Lee expects the stockpiling will force him to raise prices as much as 10%, even before the tariffs. I have to ship them in advance and take on more risk, he says. Water purifier maker Zhengyu is scouring the globe to supply the U.S. by creating a new production base outside of China. Zheng's company, Tesron, is considering Vietnam, Malaysia, and Mexico, but at the moment is leaning towards Dubai, even though it will increase his costs by 30% compared to China. The domestic market is too competitive. We've been waiting to jump out of it for some time, he says. Trump's tariffs gave us the final push. Lung Rong, who makes skincare products, is worried he might have to stop exporting to the U.S. completely. His goods got hit with tariffs north of 20% during President Trump's first term. With his thin margins, Lung is hoping he can pass on the cost of any tariff to his customers. In the past, we all felt the U.S. market was the greatest market that everyone wanted to sell to. But with all the uncertainties and unfriendly decisions, the U.S. is less attractive now, he says. It's a real pity.
Tariff seems to be the preferred instrument for Mr. Trump, or for
everybody,
or for his incoming administration. However, I would say someone need to really tell Mr. Trump, the president-elect and soon to be the president, that the tariffs are paid by the American people, mostly the consumers. It's not paid by China or the Chinese government at all. So in a sense, the tariffs against China or against the Canadians or the Mexicans or any other country are a kind of tax against the American people. It is one of the reasons why it fueled inflation and eroded the quality of life of the American people. I'm sure Mr. Trump cares about a more balanced trade, but tariff is probably the worst instrument he can wield on imports. There must be other ways which can help the Americans achieve their strategic goal without, for example, inflating the tariffs, because the tariffs are paid by the American people.
Breaking news out of the White House as China has responded after Trump went after his allies of Canada and Mexico with a 25% tariff. He went after China with only a 10%, and China said, quote, "Bring it the fuck on."
Kaboom. Trump thought he was going to play the big, bad economic bully and slap 10 to 25% tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Baby, the math was remedial. Nothing was adding up because he raised 15% more on Mexico and Canada, our allies, our trading partners, than he did on China, his so-called sworn enemy. China, unbothered as ever, looked at this foolery and said, "Hold my green tea." China enters the chat with receipts. Yes, it did. So America thought it was flexing by increasing tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but China took that personally. What did they do? Trump thought he was pulling a big boy move when he slapped a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, targeting over $450 billion in goods. China responded with 15% tariffs on U.S. coal, 15% tariffs on liquefied natural gas, 10% tariffs on U.S. crude oil. Furthermore, China also passed export controls on critical minerals and metals used in U.S. tech and defense industries. China hit back with precision, but in a strategic way that won't hurt them too much. China's got EV dominance, so their gas demand is already on a downward trend. That's chess, not checkers or playing in your navel or whatever Donald Trump thinks he is doing. Concepts or plans don't seem to be working, and the Nepo babies, weirdos, and white nationalists advising him, Donald Trump, don't seem to be the best people. But here's the real kicker. China is a currency manipulator. They can devalue the yuan anytime they want to make their exports even cheaper, and guess what? That's exactly what they're doing. If China ever decided to match the US dollar in value, they would take over as the #1 global economy overnight. But they're not even worried about that. They just want to keep making money while the US is over here scrambling. The bubble of American superiority is popping. Now let's get into why this happened in the first place. The Trump administration wasn't expecting this level of clapback because they operate in a bubble of arrogance. They assumed Mexico and Canada would just roll over, and they completely overlooked China's ability to hit back fast and hard. The aftermath, Mexico and Canada provided the collab we didn't know we needed in 2025. Not only did Mexico and Canada clap back, but Mexico was the one leading the charge. Justin Trudeau, he had to call President Claudia Sheinbaum. I told told you to expect good things from this woman for help because she was the one spearheading strategy. So much for American exceptionalism, right? This is what happens when you assume other nations are inferior just because they don't look like you. And the irony, Canada and Mexico only agreed to what they already agreed to during the Biden administration. So Trump out here parading a win that is not his and true to form of the mediocre white male leadership model, taking credit for something that he did not do. Pure theatrics, pure theater. But what else can you expect when you elect a reality TV show throwback rodeo circus clown for the second time? Moving right along. Trump is over here scrambling to save face, acting like these countries are just now taking action, when in reality, they've been strategizing for months. The tariffs lasted 0.2 seconds because they were about to hit red states the hardest. The very people cheering him on were about to be in Walmart looking very sick. And the markets on Monday, as the Divine One predicted in my previous video, was impacted, losing 500 points in a single day. The only other time the market was hit like this in recent memory was when it fell 1,000 points the day the shutdown occurred back in March of 2020. Now, who was president then? Oh yeah, Presidente Fat Bastardo, Donald Trump. Now let's talk about the real power move. China has two options that could cripple the U.S. economy and tank the U.S. dollar. Option one, currency manipulation. China can drop the value of the yuan so their products become cheaper, outperforming the U.S. effortlessly and making any future tariffs moot. Option number two, bond dumps. Japan just sold all of its U.S. bonds. If China follows, the dollar's strength collapses, so does the full faith and credit of the U.S. And I know what you're thinking.
Well, Divine, why is it so important if Japan dumped U.S. bonds?
Well, let's take a step back here. Japan and China hold the largest amount of U.S. Treasury bonds. The United States relies heavily on foreign countries buying its debt in the form of U.S. Treasury bonds, T-bonds. Right now, China and Japan are the biggest holders of U.S. debt, and if they dump these bonds, it's a wrap for America's financial dominance. Let's break it down like a Divine One read. What are U.S. Treasury bonds? U.S. Treasury bonds equals America's IOU notes. The U.S. government sells these bonds to raise money. Countries like China and Japan buy these bonds, basically lending money to the U.S. In return, the U.S. pays them interest on these bonds. It's a global trust system. Countries hold U.S. debt because the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, the safest investment. But what if China and Japan start dumping their bonds? Let's get into why this would shake the global economy and why America would be begging for mercy. The impact, number one, the U.S. dollar crashes. Right now, Japan holds over $1.1 trillion in U.S. debt. China holds around $800 billion in U.S. debt. If they sell off these bonds, the value of the U.S. dollar would drop. Foreign investors would panic, the stock market would go into free fall, and the U.S. economy would be shaking. Why does this matter? The U.S. relies on selling these bonds to fund its government. If China and Japan stop buying and start selling, the U.S. will struggle to finance its own debt. Impact number two, interest rates would skyrocket. Impact number three, other countries would follow suit. The U.S. dollar would lose its status as the world's reserve currency, aka the backbone of the global economy. Impact number four, the U.S. loses its superpower status. Meanwhile, China playing the long game. Meanwhile, China's tech industry is leaping over the U.S. The world is moving on. Instead of depending on the U.S., China is strengthening ties with Europe, Africa, and Latin America. U.S. policy moves, a desperate cover-up. When Trump realized how bad he fumbled, what did he do? What he always do. It's his go-to when he loses. He tried to shift focus. Let's look at how he tried to change the narrative. The Department of Defense suddenly announces they're focusing on Muslim extremists in Africa. The administration cuts funding to South Africa, trying to punish them for reclaiming land from colonizers. I wonder if this is an Elon Musk pet project or maybe J.D. Vance's white nationalist wet dream. Now, Trump is saying the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. And let's not forget how quickly the media switched gears to try and make it look like the U.S. was still in control. But the facts remain. China, Canada, and Mexico just played the U.S. like a fiddle. The economic fallout, America's house of cards is crashing down. This is the part where we talk about long-term impact. Y'all remember when China stopped buying U.S. soybeans during Trump's first term? Farmers were struggling and looking for government handouts. Well, Japan just sold all its U.S. bonds, and if more countries follow, that's long-term damage to America's credit and global reputation. Canada and Mexico are actively seeking new trade partners. Countries don't trust the U.S. economy anymore because policy shifts with every election. China controls critical minerals minerals the U.S. needs for tech and defense, and they just tighten export restrictions. And yet, Trump's over here acting like he's winning. Where? The media distraction tactics? Of course, instead of covering the real economic implications, the media keeps Americans distracted with nonsense. Oh no, TikTok was down for 5 minutes. Oh wow, China has cities more advanced than what we were taught. Sweetheart, the U.S. government has been lying to y'all. China's been outpacing America for decades. Y'all just weren't paying attention. And the legacy media still gaslighting because they don't want to speak ill of Donald Trump, hoping and praying viewers will trickle in from Fox News, while YouTubers and TikTokers are getting more views off one video than the entire MSNBC lineup. Maybe legacy media should start reporting, I don't know, the news. Meanwhile, Trump's big master negotiator image completely shattered. The 30-day moratorium on tariffs, it wasn't a power move, it was an emergency stopgap because the backlash was immediate and the market was impacted. If there is anything I want y'all to take away from this, it's recognizing the game when you see it. America has been outmaneuvered because it refuses to accept that it's not the only player on the field. China isn't trying to be number one, they're trying to secure the bag. Mexico and Canada aren't weak, they're smart and strategic. The Trump administration is fumbling because they underestimated their competition. What's next? The real issue is that the U.S. is becoming unreliable and irrelevant. Trust in the U.S. as a global economic leader shaky. China, Mexico, and Canada, they're moving strategically while Donald Trump is moving amateurish, displaying the full spectrum of incompetency. This is not 2016. The world is playing no more games. But I thought Darren Betty, the acting Undersecretary of State, said, and I quote, "Competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work." How's that working out, Darren? So let's recap. Trump thought he was about to stunt on China, Mexico, and Canada, but instead they played tic-tac-toe on his forehead. Canada and Mexico finessed him into making deals that were already planned under Biden. China is sitting back waiting for the U.S. to collapse under its own foolishness. And the global economy is looking at America like, oh, you real ghetto. Baby, y'all better buckle up. Well, it looks like our time is up. I thank you for making the time to go through it to the end with me. Like, share, and subscribe, please, and thank you.